During my pregnancy, I felt like I was living in a dream. Every single day was filled with excitement, anticipation, and this almost childlike joy at the thought of meeting the little girl growing inside me. I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes, place my hand on my belly, and whisper, "I can't wait to meet you." It became a routine, me talking to her even before she arrived, as if we already had a bond that nothing in the world could break. At home, I poured all my energy into preparing the nursery. I remember spending hours painting the walls a soft pastel pink, carefully choosing the exact shade that felt warm but calming. I wanted the room to feel like a safe little cocoon, a place where love would always surround her. I folded and refolded her tiny onesies, stacked the diapers neatly, and arranged plush toys on a small white shelf. There was a rocking chair in the corner, and every night I would sit there, imagining myself holding her, rocking her to sleep. Beside my own bed, I placed a crib so she could be close to me during those first fragile nights. Every detail mattered because to me, she already mattered more than anything else in the world. My husband was just as excited. He would tease me sometimes about how meticulous I was with the details, but I could see in his eyes how much he wanted this too. He built the crib with his own hands, even though he wasn't exactly the handy type. He read books about fatherhood, and sometimes I'd catch him practicing how to swaddle with a blanket and a teddy bear. We laughed so much during those moments. For us, this wasn't just about having a baby. It was about building the family we had always dreamed of. The closer the due date got, the more emotional I became. I remember standing in the doorway of that nursery one evening, the sun setting, the light falling gently on the little bed, and I started to cry. They weren't sad tears, not even nervous tears. They were tears of pure happiness, of gratitude, because I felt like life was finally giving me everything I'd ever hoped for. Then the big day finally came. The contractions started early in the morning, sharp and undeniable. My husband grabbed the bag we had prepared weeks in advance, the baby clothes, the blankets, the little hat I couldn't wait to put on her head. We rushed to the hospital, my heart racing with both fear and joy. As we walked through those hospital doors, I gripped his hand tightly. He looked at me with that calm, reassuring smile and said, "We're ready. You've got this." And in that moment, with him by my side, I truly believed it. I believed that everything was going to be perfect, that I was about to live the happiest chapter of my life. I didn't know then that perfection can sometimes be just the illusion right before the storm. The day of the birth felt like a blur, a mixture of joy, pain, fear, and overwhelming emotion. By the time we reached the hospital, my contractions were coming hard and fast. Nurses in light blue scrubs rushed me into a room, their voices calm and professional, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. My husband stayed by my side, holding my hand so tightly it almost hurt, whispering encouragement at every contraction. "Breathe, baby, you're doing amazing, she's almost here." Hours passed in a haze of sweat, pain, and anticipation. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them just to distract myself from the waves that felt like they would tear me apart. But every time I wanted to give up, every time I thought I couldn't do it anymore, I would imagine her, our baby girl, the tiny person who had been kicking inside me for months. That thought kept me going. Then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the doctor say, "One last push, you're almost there." I gathered every ounce of strength left in me and pushed with everything I had. And then it happened. The sound that would change my life forever filled the room. The cry of a newborn. I broke into tears instantly, my body trembling. My husband kissed my forehead, his own eyes red and wet, whispering, "She's here. She's really here." For one fleeting moment, it felt like nothing in the world could ever go wrong. The nurse placed the baby on my chest for just a second, and I saw her tiny face. Her skin was red, her eyes tightly shut, her little mouth letting out the most beautiful, fragile cry I'd ever heard. My heart felt like it would explode. But then, almost as quickly as she was placed in my arms, the baby was lifted away. The nurse said she needed to run some routine checks. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It seemed normal, something every newborn goes through. but there was something in the way the nurse glanced at the doctor, something in the way their expressions tightened that made my stomach twist. Through the exhaustion and the haze, I noticed it, a flicker of panic in their eyes. The doctor leaned in close to the nurse and whispered something I couldn't hear. My husband noticed it too. He frowned, asked, "Is everything okay?" The nurse forced a smile, too quick, too stiff, and replied, "Everything's fine, just routine tests." But it didn't feel fine. They carried her out of the room, and as the door swung closed, I saw the nurse exchange one last look with another staff member in the hallway, a look that wasn't medical or professional. It was something else. Something I couldn't quite put into words, but it made my chest tighten with dread. Lying there, drenched in sweat, exhausted and half delirious, I told myself I was overthinking, that it was just the pain, the adrenaline, the hormones making me paranoid. I wanted so badly to believe them, to believe my baby was fine. But deep down, in a place I couldn't silence, I felt it, the first seed of doubt. When the nurse finally brought the baby back, something inside me shifted. I should have felt pure joy, relief, that wave of maternal instinct everyone talks about, but instead I felt uneasy. I looked down at the tiny bundle in my arms, and my heart wanted to believe, desperately, that this was my daughter. But my eyes told me something didn't feel right. I'd only seen her for a few seconds before they whisked her away, but in that moment, I was sure I had noticed certain details. Her nose, the shape of her lips, and now, staring at the baby they handed me, I hesitated. Her nose seemed different, her features slightly off. I told myself I was crazy, but the doubt wouldn't let go. I whispered to my husband, "Does she look different to you?" He frowned, glanced down at her, then back at me. "Honey, she's perfect. You're just exhausted. You've been through hell. Don't overthink it." His words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Instead, they made me feel isolated, as if I was the only one who saw it. Later, when the nurse came to check on us, I couldn't hold back. I asked, "Are you absolutely sure this is my baby? I mean, you didn't mix anything up?" The nurse froze just a half second, a flash in her eyes that I caught before she masked it with a polite smile. "Of course this is your baby. You're just tired. It happens all the time with new mothers. It's the hormones, the stress." She said it with that practiced tone, the one nurses use to calm patients, but it felt too rehearsed, too defensive. I wanted to argue, to push back, but the way she looked at me, firm, almost cold, made me swallow my words. I nodded and forced a smile, pretending to believe her, but inside, the seed of doubt grew roots. Back home, that feeling didn't leave me. In fact, it grew stronger. I would cradle her in the nursery I had so carefully prepared, staring at her little face, trying to reconcile the image burned into my memory from those first moments after birth with the baby in my arms now. Then came the little things. Her hospital bracelet had handwriting that looked smudged, almost rewritten. The paperwork they gave me had my name, but the birth time seemed slightly different from what I remembered. Small details, maybe meaningless, but they gnawed at me. When family visited, everyone cooed over the baby. They said she looked adorable, perfect. Some said she resembled my husband, but no one mentioned me, not once, as if no one could see me in her. One evening, rocking her in the chair by the window, I whispered, "Are you really mine?" The words felt like poison leaving my lips. My chest ached with guilt because what kind of mother doubts her own child? But somewhere deep inside, I knew. Something had happened in that hospital room, something they weren't telling me. As the weeks passed, I tried to silence my doubts, but the signs became impossible to ignore. At first, it was little things, so small that I almost convinced myself I was irrational, but little things, when they pile up, become something much bigger. One of the first shocks came during a routine checkup. The pediatrician asked about our blood types, and when he noted them down, his eyebrows lifted just slightly. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later at home, I did the math. Both my husband and I had blood types that simply couldn't have produced hers. I told myself it must be an error, but the thought clung to me like a shadow. Then came the physical differences. I remember the nurse lifting her to my chest for just a second after the delivery. Her skin tone had been slightly darker, her lips fuller. The baby I had now, her features didn't quite match that memory. Every time I brought it up, my husband would sigh. "Stop torturing yourself. Babies change so quickly. They look different every week." Maybe he was right, but deep down, I knew what I had seen. One night, scrolling through my phone while rocking her to sleep, I stumbled on an article that made my blood run cold. The headline read, "Hospital accused of negligence in maternity ward." My heart dropped. It was the very hospital where I had given birth. The article spoke of mishandled paperwork, mislabeled records, even whispers of babies being switched to cover up mistakes. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. It felt like someone had written my deepest fear right there in black and white. The next day, I started going through all the documents from the hospital. Discharge papers, certificates, wristbands. The more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. The birth time was off by almost 20 minutes from what I remembered the doctor saying. The footprint sheet looked smudged as if it had been pressed in haste. And worst of all, the hospital bracelet that was supposed to match mine had clearly been rewritten. The ink was faint in some places, darker in others, like someone had altered it. My stomach churned. I wanted to believe there was some logical explanation, but the pit in my chest told me otherwise. Still, when I tried to voice these fears, no one wanted to listen. My mother told me I was overreacting. My husband begged me to stop obsessing. Even my best friend said gently, "You need rest, not conspiracy theories." But at night, when the house was quiet, I would hold her against me and stare into her little face, whispering, "Who are you?" Tears would blur my vision and guilt would eat at me for even asking. But the truth was, no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I felt like I was holding someone else's child. And that unbearable thought grew louder every single day. I reached a point where I couldn't keep living in this fog of doubt. Every smile, every tiny laugh my baby made, moments that should have been filled with pure joy, were poisoned by this gnawing question in my chest. Is she really mine? So one afternoon, while my husband was at work, I made a decision that terrified me. I scheduled a DNA test. Just walking into that small clinic felt like betrayal. I remember clutching my baby girl against me, my heart racing as if I were about to commit a crime. The nurse swabbed the inside of her tiny cheek so gently, and then mine. It took less than 5 minutes, and yet those minutes felt like a lifetime. The waiting was worse than anything I had ever experienced. Every day, I checked my email a dozen times. Every night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, dreading the moment the results would come. A part of me prayed it would prove me wrong, that I would feel stupid for even doubting, that I could finally move on, hold her without hesitation, and love her fully without this shadow between us. But the day the email arrived, my world shattered. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. It felt like someone had written my deepest fear right there in black and white. When I clicked on the file, the words blurred through my tears, but the meaning was clear. 0% probability of maternity. I gasped so hard I thought my chest would cave in. My knees buckled under me and I slid to the floor sobbing, clutching my stomach as if I had been physically struck. My baby, this little girl I had fed, rocked, sung to, and loved for weeks, was not mine. Not biologically, not by blood. I wanted to scream, to deny it, to smash the laptop against the wall, but the truth was right there in front of me, undeniable, scientific. I called the hospital immediately, my voice cracking, desperate. "I have proof you switched my baby. How could you do this to me?" The director's response was cold, rehearsed. "Ma'am, that's impossible. Our procedures are strict. You must be mistaken." But I wasn't mistaken. That night, when I couldn't stop crying, a doctor from the hospital called me privately. His voice was low, almost trembling. He said, "You didn't hear this from me, but there was a mistake that night. A newborn didn't survive. To avoid a lawsuit, they switched the babies." The phone nearly slipped from my hands. My heart stopped. In that instant, I realized the unthinkable. My baby, my real baby, was gone, and the child in my arms had been given to me like some sick replacement, a cover-up for their negligence. I felt like the ground opened beneath me. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was trapped in a nightmare, robbed of the one thing that mattered most, betrayed by the very people I had trusted with my life. After that phone call, I couldn't breathe. My world had collapsed twice, first when I lost my real baby, and again when I realized an entire hospital had conspired to hide the truth. For days, I lived in a fog of rage and despair. I'd sit in the nursery, staring at the pastel walls I had painted with so much love, holding the child who wasn't mine, wondering where my own flesh and blood was. But then something inside me hardened. I couldn't let them get away with this. If I didn't fight, if I stayed silent, they'd keep doing it to other families. They had to be held accountable. I found an attorney, a man named Alvarez, a gray-haired lawyer who had spent years suing hospitals for malpractice. He listened carefully, not interrupting while I poured out everything. The doubts, the inconsistencies, the DNA test, the anonymous phone call. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. He said, "This is bigger than you think. If what you're telling me is true, this isn't just negligence, it's fraud, it's cover-up, it's criminal." The case began like a war. Letters were sent, subpoenas filed, the hospital fired back immediately, denying everything. They accused me of falsifying documents, of making up the story because of postpartum depression. Their lawyers, sleek, ruthless men and women in black suits, looked at me like I was dirt. At every hearing, they painted me as hysterical, unstable, desperate for attention. Meanwhile, the harassment began. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night, strange cars parked outside my house. I knew they were trying to break me, to scare me into dropping the case, but I refused. Every time I looked at the empty crib, every time I remembered that phone call about the baby who didn't survive, my resolve grew stronger. Court was brutal. I sat there, exhausted, clutching documents while Alvarez tore into the hospital's lies. He exposed inconsistencies in medical records, showed proof that timestamps had been altered, birth certificates tampered with. Piece by piece, the mask slipped. And then, the moment that shook the courtroom, a nurse came forward, a whistleblower. She testified under oath that she had been pressured to switch identification bracelets on newborns the night I gave birth. She broke down in tears as she admitted, "We were told to keep quiet. We were told it was for the hospital's reputation." The silence in that courtroom was deafening. Even the hospital's attorneys looked rattled. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally come out. But hope didn't erase the pain. I still had to sit there every day, listening to lawyers dissect my grief like it was a performance, while I clutched the baby girl who had been placed in my arms under a lie. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight for my sanity, for justice, for the child I had lost, and for the truth the hospital wanted to bury forever. The day of the verdict felt unreal, like I was standing outside my own body. I sat in that cold courtroom, my hands trembling, my lawyer whispering encouragement beside me, while the judge read the decision. The hospital had been found guilty of negligence, of falsifying records, of committing a cover-up that no family should ever endure. For once, their polished attorneys had no defense left. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relief. But all I felt was emptiness. Because no matter how many documents proved I was right, no matter how much money they were ordered to pay in damages, none of it could bring my baby back. My real baby, the one that had taken her first breath and then slipped away before I even had the chance to hold her. The settlement was huge, enough to pay off my debts, enough to make headlines in every local paper. But headlines don't heal broken hearts. Money doesn't erase the memories of rocking a child that wasn't mine while wondering where my own flesh and blood was. Walking out of that courtroom, I carried my daughter, the baby who wasn't mine by blood, but had been mine in every other way.
She was heavier now, stronger, her little fingers gripping my shirt as if she knew I needed her. People ask me all the time, are you going to give her back? Will you try to find the other family? But what they didn't understand is that there was no other family. My baby was gone, and this little girl, though she came to me through lies and tragedy, was still the child I had fed, held, and loved from the very first day. At night, when the world is quiet, I still sit in that rocking chair by the window. Sometimes I cry, sometimes I whisper apologies to the daughter I lost, and sometimes I remind myself that love isn't always written in DNA. Love is in the sleepless nights, the lullabies, the way your heart aches when your child cries. The hospital stole from me something that can never be replaced. They stole the first chapter of motherhood, and they left me with scars I will carry forever. But they couldn't steal my capacity to love. They couldn't take away the bond I've built with the child who ended up in my arms, no matter how she got there. If there's anything I've learned through all of this, it's that silence is deadly. When you feel something is wrong, when your gut screams at you that the pieces don't fit, you cannot stay quiet. Because if I had, the truth would have died in that hospital along with my real child. So now, when I tell my story, I tell it not for sympathy, but as a warning. Trust your instincts, ask the hard questions, and never assume that just because someone wears a white coat, they hold your best interest at heart. Because sometimes, the very place that should protect your family is the place that tears it apart.